Hey, Lance, thanks for joining us today. As way getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Brian. I was voluntold by some of the folks that follow you online, so here we are. It's nice to be here. Um, History. So like a lot of people, I came out of college. I knew I wanted to be in sales. It started off just absolutely terribly. I I interviewed at all these different places, and I took the worst offer that was made across maybe four or five different companies at the time because they were going to put me through like a 6 week boot camp, a sales boot camp, and I figured that's going to pay off sometime, right? It had to, and they did. It was brutal. I stayed there for 2 years. We were selling phone systems, if
Wow.
you can imagine that. So literally, remember the old sign-in sheets when you're going to go meet your prospect? You see like five or six people selling almost the exact same thing that you're selling, and it was good because you have to learn how to differentiate and nuances between everybody else. um, so I mean it was a terrible experience, but it was great. I thought it laid a really good foundation for me going forward. I gained a lot more appreciation of the art really that sales is, versus people that can just they think they can just come in, make an easy transition and start selling. um, but I didn't really hit my stride until I got into software, and I got into a startup that was Austin based. We did really well for 5, 6 years, got acquired, went to another startup, did well, got acquired, and just repeated that for a few times. Um, and I ended up where I'm at now at Sphera. And I absolutely love it. I've sold a lot of software that it either helps makes companies more efficient, drives down costs, maybe drives up revenue. Sphere is a little bit different. We play in that space as well, but it's health and safety. So we're literally saving lives. It's environmental. So when you see these large organizations, these CEOs making these significant commitments to the market to be net zero by 2030 or net zero, carbon emissions by 2050, we work with a lot of those companies to help make them get, to help them get there, which is, to me, that's what makes waking up and getting moving exciting.
Sounds like a complex, long sales cycle.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the standard enterprise sales cycle. I break them up into two different buckets, right? There's a push cycle where you're doing a little bit of education, and those take a little bit longer. There's no budget on day one. You're
Yeah.
helping them build a business case. And then there's the pulls where they've kind of done some of that pre-work. They've heard about you, maybe talked to some customers, and they're pulling you into the cycle. And so, between both of those, it's usually between 6 and 18 months.
Well, I mean, the good thing about the poll is it appears easier, but then you're kind of commoditized, or the beauty contest, right? It's
Yeah, so there's a lot of that work that they've already put into it that you have no visibility into, right? You don't know. Somebody's been in there steering that conversation, and you have to figure out if you're going to be able to play in that construct.
yeah. And how do you do that today where you can't check out the sign-in sheet, which was my trick too? It was like I'd go back a couple of days and see who was there.
So it's all the same stuff that I'm sure you've heard, right? So if it's we get pulled into some RFPs, and you'll look at the linguistics in the RFPs, and are they speaking my competitor's language? Are they speaking my language? Does it feel like they've read my website or my competitor's website? Is it coming through certain integrators, right, that tend to work with certain partners? So you can never be definitive, but you can usually have a pretty good idea of who you're going to be competing against.
And how do you change the rules there? Because somebody's already set them, and you're kind of they've already positioned themselves and probably everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. So absolutely. So we work on the things and focus on the things that we're really strong at, and we believe if if the customer buys into those, then we're going to be the obvious choice, right? And so we go in with really strong opinions. Um, so the customer may have a framework, they may have requirements, but we'll work with them and challenge certain aspects of what they're pushing out there. Um, just presenting ways that maybe some of our customers have done things a little bit differently and seen some better results. And it's a good litmus test too, to see how receptive they are to things like that. Because at the same time, we want to help everybody, but we have to make the best use of our time, just like everybody else.
Yeah. And if you get the signal that you're, you know, B, C, or D on the list,
If we can help you later, happy to. Right? If
yeah.
you go down this path and you don't get the success you need, just we're here to help. Call us back.
And what was the motive to get into leadership?
Yeah, so I actually avoided it for years. 'Cause I was earlier in my career. It was I was having fun. I didn't have to worry about anybody else's problems. I could just sit in my silo and hit my number and usually show up to club. Um, and then I just started getting comments like, "Hey, you should do this. You should jump in here." And I would say, "Yeah, no, it's not the right fit." So my wife actually and one of my mentors got me to the point where I was open to doing it. But I said, one of the conditions I had laid out was it's got to be my team. I don't want to walk into somebody else's team. And so I had an opportunity when I was at Ecosys before we got acquired into Hexagon, where they said, "You want to build out an oil and gas team?" And I said, "I'll do it." And that's where it started.
Yeah. And did you like it immediately, or were you a fish out of water? Or
Yeah, you know, I- that's a good question. I'd say both. so, so I had a lot of really good managers. I had a really good mentor for about 10 years in my career. I think that helped me tremendously. I also worked for some really large companies after those acquisitions where I got to see some really bad leadership. So I believe you've got to learn from every experience, whether it's what you like and what you want to do and what you want to incorporate, as well as the things that you want to stay away from. Um, and so I tried to absorb the things that I thought would help the team and stayed away from the things that I didn't find useful as a sales rep.
did you fall into kind of the classic traps of looking for people identical to yourself?
No, that would have been disastrous. No, so I worked at IBM, and IBM's got a great organization, great heritage, but there's a lot of that there, right? There's a lot of guys that kind of look and smell the same.
Yeah.
Um, and I like the team dynamic where you've got a lot of different personalities into the mix. So I've got guys that are really good on strategy. They just want to kind of, our meetings with them are more like just collaborating. They're already 90% of the way there. It's just, let's get you the extra 10% and make sure you're confident to go into this meeting. And I've got people that need some motivation. I've got people that need reassurance. I've got people that love to role play and have me, play devil's advocate for them. So I think you need that. So I think having diversity across the team is so much better.
Yeah. And how did you deal with kind of the selling inside and up? Whereas a rep, you really kind of avoid like the plague, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I mean that's one of those things that you don't really see when you're a rep, right? You go to your boss, you tell him, look, hey, this is what I need from you. It makes 100% sense to me. I'll get the deal if you give me this. So just go sell it. And then inside, you've got maybe a group of teams, cross-functional teams, where you've got to go sell that idea, especially if it's something you haven't done before. And so it just it just takes a little bit of time, practice, and a little bit more patience, I think, than you're used to when you're a sales rep. Sales reps, my favorite ones, don't have any patience. You can't always have that as a manager. Sometimes you have to have a little bit more patience if you're going to work better internally.
And you have to kind of not have the sharp elbows, right? Because
You can't be the bull in the china shop. Yeah,
yeah, because you
it,
have
it, it
to
does.
empathize with what product and marketing and contracts is all going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the solutions now are SaaS based, right? So if you're, you know, I can't go push to open up a brand new data center in one place because I've got one rep that's got one deal he wants to close in that location, right? So
Yeah.
we've got to look out for what's better across the organization, not just for one individual, even
And
though we want every deal.
and how about like just your personal motives? Because the motive as a leader is about building and developing others. As a rep, it's about selling, closing, getting big deals.
Yeah. So one of my goals every year is literally to be the least compensated person on my team. That hasn't
That's well
happened yet.
put.
Yeah, hasn't happened yet. But I've got the best team, top to bottom, I've ever had. So I'm hoping we'll get a little closer in 2022.
And did it take a long time to kind of adjust the inner compass? Because a lot of leaders of the first year, they want to work on the big deals. They want to, get their fingerprints on it.
Yeah. So I try to bring in people that I trust. I look for when we bring people on board. It's we look for intelligence, motivation. Are they self-driven? High level of ethics, and then we look for a track record of success. And then once they come in, we want to build trust with them. And I've got guys that can run those big guys and gals that can run those big deals top to bottom. And I've got some that need some assistance. Right. So, sometimes when you've got a big deal that crosses a large part of the organization, and it's going to require it may require product, right? It may require the security teams to be involved. It may require customer success to be involved in those deals, and so some of them are just going to be naturally a huge team effort. And so it's my job just to work with the rep and make sure he or she understands he's got all those resources and to take advantage of them.
And how about like the hiring? Was that a big adjustment? Because if you haven't hired before, it's a talent in and of itself.
Yeah, I got a few wrong in the beginning. I
Yeah.
I also had a really good mentor that kind of gave me some um, foundational pieces to kind of rely on, and one is probably not maybe a little harsh to say, or at least for some people to hear in today's world, but it was basically hire slow, fire fast. You want to believe that you can sell, that you can coach everybody up, but the reality is you just can't do it. um, and some folks just don't see it, and you get a limited amount of time in that kind of pre-hire to really judge people, and some people can get through that, right? And without exposing some of the elements that you would really want to see, that would tell you that they're not going to be successful in your company. They could be successful, next door, but in your company, for whatever reason, that you could just tell they wouldn't be successful. So absolutely. So hire slow, fire fast.
And during that hiring process, you talked about intelligence, track records, uh, self motivated. How do you get that sense during the interview process? Because people come from a big portfolio company. It could have been them, but it might have been the accounts or the territory.
Yes. So I 100% agree. So on some of them, I think you can test. I actually used to have a little test that I would do in one of the second or third interviews. Now with the job market, right, it's even more challenging because you have to turn
The
around
time.
these offers so quickly to get the guys that or gals that you want. But when we had more time, I would actually test people just to hear their thought process, how they would solve certain problems, right? And that they would be complex problems, so you don't necessarily think that they're going to solve them, but you kind of get to hear their thought process, get them to think out loud, and so you can hear some of that. Motivation, I think, is harder to kind of see on sales calls. Everybody can kind of
Fake it.
pretend to be motivated. I think it depends. We try to get more of that through the referral process, trying to find people that know the individual, whether it's the people they put on paper as their references or people that we can just get to around the process. So I've always put a lot of effort in trying to get the real information, the real snapshot. Were they really 101% of their quota in 2019? Were they really 95% of their quota the following year? Right. And if I can't triangulate some of that data, we'll walk.
Yeah. And what have you been fooled on? Like when you made a bad hire, was it that they were, saying that they were a lot better than they really were, or they're just not coachable, where they think it's everything but
Both.
them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's both. Yeah, so in the interview process, you can kind of fish to see if people are they're always kind of externalizing, negative things, right? It wasn't anything I did. A sales engineer came in and just totally blew up my demo. I had it teed up perfectly, right? Um, but but some things you can't really do that. So I think it's you do have to spend some time on it, but I think you can coax some of that out. So I literally have a spreadsheet where I have columns based on the people I'm talking to, and I've got specific questions based on what I've seen in the resume that I want to test in the interviews.
Yeah.
Does
And
obviously doesn't always work, but
but you read the
you're just trying
resume?
to increase your odds. Yes, yes, yes.
I can't tell you the number of interviews I've been on with it. They clearly didn't read uh, the, the resume at all. And you're like, yeah,
No,
tell
not
me
not
about
here. No.
yourself. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And if you were to build like the perfect sales rep, what would the ingredients be?
yeah. So I worked with one of my SEs for over a decade, and he's a retired Marine. He was in the Marine Force the Marines for 18 years, and his expression was, "We need people that are fire and forget, like it's a bullet down range." So they're self starters. They're not waiting for anything to happen. I like people that challenge me, right? So don't just sit and wait for me to call you on our one on one. Start a fire, light a fire under my, what, and force me to start getting things done for you if you need to get deals closed. So to me, it's you want people in there that are running it just like it's their business, right? And I'm just there to help them.
And I got to imagine on a complex sale like that, what's the ramp look like? You know,
For the reps to get comfortable.
get comfortable and effective, feel at home, feel like they know what they're dealing with.
Yeah, so it takes some time. So we put in place almost like a week by week schedule to help at least maximize their ramp up time. But we also spend a lot of time and effort trying to find people that are from the space. So we'll target, competitors, right, to try to find people that are at least familiar, either directly in the space or maybe played around the space or sell to the same people that we sell to and talk to. Um, it doesn't always exist, but if you really like somebody, at some point it's about who do you think is going to sell. And so if you really like somebody, if they don't have any expertise in your space, but they can sell and you're confident in that, then, to me, I'll bring them in and then we'll just surround them with the people that can help them until they no longer need the help. Whether it's, most salespeople know how to have a business conversation with somebody, right? They don't even almost need to know what they're selling, but just they pull out, coax out the problems that the business owner or whoever's trying to solve, and then use that internally. And we can help you go back and position and make sure you're looking good in next steps and help you drive it.
And you came
So
highly
early
recommended.
on, I would almost liken it like early on to like a bus driver, right?
Well,
You
well,
just you just need to know who to pick up, take it to the right conversation, drop them off, go to the next stop, and we'll make sure you've got the people to help.
that's it. And you find a lot of enterprise reps who are very good at managing existing accounts, but the getting of
Mm-hmm.
new accounts and being a competitor, especially when you're not column A, the incumbent or the person who wrote the RFI,
Yeah, sure.
that's a tough sell.
It's a it's a different ball game altogether.
Right. It's not a service sale. It's not even a relationship sale. It's kind of that and some strategy.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree. So company does a lot to help. So we compensate differently. Existing logos for versus new logos, just to
Smart.
set the motivation in the proper place. We internally we've got a really great marketing team here. Um, I don't know that I've ever said that before. So
I don't think
um,
I've ever heard that before.
yeah, so we work really really well with them. We do a lot of our planning together, so we're in lockstep with one another. Um, and and so we when we target these external companies, it's in a very precise way. We're not shotgunning information out there. We're going after very specific strategic target accounts internally. We've got a series of ways that we do that. We've got resources with SDR teams that we couple with the outside sales teams, in addition to what we're doing with marketing to help start those conversations. The hardest thing to do is to start those conversations.
It is, yeah. And where do you see your career going? Are you comfortable in leadership? You want to keep moving up? Or you want to do the startup, then the startup acquisition, or
Yeah, I've done that a few times. Even at Sphere, we got 3 months ago we were acquired by Blackstone. So um, this is like my fifth time going through this. I was going to start like on my offers. I was going to request an acquisition fee, but I haven't been able to sell
yeah.
that. So, but no, but it's been fun. So I love it where I'm at. I think one day. And I get to work really closely with my CRO and my CEO. They give us a lot of leeway. We basically my counterparts and I run basically a third of the business each on the enterprise side, um, and I think we work really well together. One day I do want to take one more step up. I think and run the team in general.
And what advice would you have for first-time sales leaders or for sellers that are thinking about going into leadership?
Get a good mentor.
Yeah.
I was lucky to stumble into it early on. I don't even think I realized I had a good mentor until 5 or 10 years into it. But looking back, it's somebody that I worked for. He was a complete hard ass, um, but you always knew where you stood. You always knew where you needed to go, and he gave you the advice. Without sugarcoating anything, which I think at the end of the day pays off. So get a mentor,
And did that
and
person
you'll be surprised too. I think it's easy. I think we have a mentoring program here. Um, People put their hand up and say, who wants to work with a mentor, and half of the executive team said, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. I'd love to work with somebody. So I think people are afraid to ask, but I think most people in senior leadership really like that.
well, that's it, because it doesn't have to be some formal thing.
No,
It can just be a friendly conversation.
yeah, I totally agree. So I mentored a peer here. We had conversations every couple of weeks. What could we accomplish before the next time we talk? What next steps do we need to take to kind of help you in the career goals that we set out on day one? And it it's a lot more natural than you might think it would be.
And what mistakes do you see first-time sales leaders make? And
Wow. I saw so many. So again, this goes back to that point we talked about where um, some people manage by a spreadsheet, right? I, I think I've seen you talk about some of these things on some of your little fireside walks, I guess. Um, they cookie cutter their approach to everybody. So no matter who you are, no matter what your status is, they basically treat you the same as the next guy or gal, the next guy or gal. And I really think that the first thing you need to realize is that your team is going to be made up of people that come from different places. There are different places in their lives, in their sales careers, and they need different help. So if you're really going to maximize or help that person kind of maximize their career, that you need to pay attention to kind of some of the signals they're sending you, and work with them and kind of create an independent plan for them.
well, that's it. And did you ever fall into those traps, or did the mentor kind of help you
No,
there?
well, you might have to ask my team that if I've ever fallen into those traps. So maybe, um, but if it was probably earlier on in my career, because the way I look at it now is when I bring a guy or gal on, I just start immediately asking them, where do you need help, right? How can we're going to spend X amount of time together. I don't want to waste your time in areas that you don't need help. So you tell me where I can help you, and they basically give me the outline of where they think they need help. It's not always 100% right. Sometimes they miss things, um, but usually between the feedback they give me, my observations, and then the talking to people that they work closely with in other organizations, you can usually put together a really good plan in terms of what that person needs to maximize their path.
And what would you characterize the differences between like the very best reps you've experienced, either worked with or managed or observed, and the mainstream, the good, the B players, the solid, 80 to 110% of their number?
Yeah, so I think I mean, they're driven. They don't want to waste time, right? They're extremely sensitive where they're going to waste time. Um, I've had guys and gals on my team, and we're selling with other teams, right? So we're one sales team in a group with other sales teams, and it's been that way ever since I got into management, right? So we have to interact with some of these other sales teams, and sometimes these high performers, right? They're so controlling with their time. They don't share or play nicely with some of the other kids sometimes because if they don't see a path to money, they're not going to invest the time. So I think it's a level of impatience, it's time management, and these are also the guys that really want that executive kind of boardroom moment. They want to drive. They want to drive the deal to that point, and they want to be the one to get it done.
Yeah.
Now, did that answer your question?
It does, because you see that a lot, and they usually, they're great with deals, but the internal and the
Oh yeah,
cooperation
yeah.
it lacks a little polish, I guess, right?
Little more of lone wolves, kind of lone wolf
Well,
syndrome.
well, that's it. Because people always talk down about lone wolves, but if you look at the very top performers, they're not the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. They're the people that
That's
they
right.
they have their agenda and they're laser focused.
Yeah, on them. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
yeah. I totally agree.
at the end of the day, the company wants the deal, the customer wants the deal, and the rep wants the deal. And if they don't do it the prettiest way possible, it's usually a little not as pretty as it should be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree because they'll tend to color outside the lines a little bit. So that at some point that usually you need to go back and clean that up.
Yeah, because usually big things and unusual, what appears impossible, when it happens, it isn't usually done the way that you anticipated.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think we touched on this earlier too, right? So that's what I like about the high performers because they'll push me, they'll
Yeah.
test me, right? They'll drive me into having conversations internally to make sure that we're setting the framework for their deal to come through, right?
Yeah. And it takes that. Well, what do you think the top thing you learned, going from selling like a commodity like phone system to now something that's just the opposite of a commodity, right? It's a very specific enterprise type thing. What selling skills do you wish you had earlier?
So I think kind of passion for what you're doing. I think is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think once you do that, if you're passionate about it, you'll get into it. You'll invest the time, and a lot of good things kind of happen from there. So early on in my career, the boot camp was great, but I hadn't approached sales like a career yet. And so, I wasn't doing, the reading, right? Um, understanding how to map out really complex accounts, finding your buyer, triangulating what you're hearing from different people in the accounts, see who's telling you the truth, right? So that's all stuff that you either learn over time through experience or just kind of going through all those kind of prototypical books, whether it's this isn't a sales book, right? But 4 disciplines of execution or strategic selling, solution selling, spin selling, all of those staples, right? You need to go through and read and internalize different pieces of that, and that eventually is will influence your sales style.
Yeah, it's that strategic stuff, thinking through multiple steps before you step.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Because if you take the wrong step in the real world, it could cost you a nice chunk of change.
A big chunk of change, especially in your space.
It can, yeah, it can.
Cool, Lance. Hey, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
So they could just look me up on LinkedIn, Lance Hunter, that's Fira, and connect with me. Happy to chat with you.